thing.
Weird.
You know, someone said that frickin' Panera's Pepsi's taste funny.
Better.
No, I mean,
What? Hello and welcome everybody to the Average Intelligence Podcast. We've got Lisa Ekman back with us. Lisa, how are you?
I am great. How are you, Jake?
Well, I just told you before we went live, my head is spinning. I don't know which way is up anymore, and it's crazy out there.
There is no doubt about that. It is crazy and it is hard to tell, like, what is true, what is real, what is right anymore. So I'm with you on that.
My biggest thing is I kind of I don't know that I pride myself. Yeah, I pride myself on it. I can usually kind of sort of at least hypothesize the ulterior motives going on, but I just got to be honest. I'm not following. I'm not following the Trump train on this one because it's real. There's a lot of twists and turns, and I can't for the life of me figure out or even hypothesize the motivation for what has transpired. So I'm really hoping you can help illuminate some of this for me.
Well, I'll do my best. One of the things that I have said since my awakening is that I can't always tell you what is true. I can tell you a lot of things that aren't. And I think that's the way to start. But with a lot of things going on right now, I don't know what the whole delay on, for example, the Epstein Files was, and now why all of a sudden we're having them and what all that's about. I don't know. There's a lot of really hard things to sort of decipher right now, but I don't know which of those you're most referring to
I would
either.
I would say for me personally, it's kind of the whole this really weird start and stop game. And I guess I can kind of lay out how I see things and then maybe we can parse it out and try to figure it out together. So I remember now there's been this narrative, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember Trump sort of campaigning on releasing the Epstein files, but I don't recall it being a major party platform. It was mostly other people on the right that were kind of talking about it. But Trump did mention it, or at least at the very least, I recall him answering questions about it and saying, yes, we'll release them. But then they got into office and then certain things were released and then we were told that was it. But then they said, no, there's more. Here's binders. But then the binders just had stuff that was already released and everybody was kind of confused. And then we went back to, well, no, that's it. There's nothing else. And then we went to, no, wait, there is more, but we have to protect victims. So we're not going to release that. Then it went back to, no, that was it. And then it went to there is way more and we need to force them to release it, and that beach ball got bounced back and forth between House Republicans and Democrats, like a horrible game of beach volleyball. And then Trump was kind of saying things, I don't want to misquote him, but it seemed that he was resistant for the legislation. And now, just yesterday, I think it was, he came out and basically was directing, House Republicans to pass the bill to get it all released, which is also confusing because he can direct the Department of Justice to do so basically any time if I'm not misunderstood or if I'm not misunderstanding. So yeah, I'm all sorts confused.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a few things probably going on. I think that when Trump first came back into office, I'm not sure he could trust what was in those files. And I think that that's a big part of it. I don't know, because honestly, I mean, obviously, I'm not. I never worked at the Department of Justice. I don't know how they operate. I know that that was a very anti-Trump organization prior
Previously, yep.
to, and it when I think about an FBI that has all sorts of undercover people at the Capitol on January 6th, for example, I don't put it past people to put things in a file that aren't real or true. Um, right? So I think part of it might have been that. I know one of the things that Trump wanted to do was release the grand jury testimony, right? Because that is official court sworn into evidence under oath that was given to grand juries. And then the judges prevented that from happening,
Right,
right?
and that's an important distinction because the way I understand it is they're calling for the release of everything, including like all these emails. What's it? That's not me. Yeah, but and I did say that I think I said this 2 days ago. It was like, yeah, I mean I've read some of these emails, but let's pause for a second. And are we now like I'm not saying Trump's guilty or innocent, I don't know, but we're gonna start taking the word of Jeffrey Epstein now without any salt whatsoever?
Yeah, and so I think that's all it's all confusing too. I mean, and it's so and one has to ask themselves like why do the Democrats want it released now? They had the ability to release it, under Biden if that was what they wanted to do. So why now? One of the things I always ask is what are they trying to distract us from, right? And so I think maybe that we can both ponder that a little bit because, one of the things that happens quite frequently is that we have media direct us to something so that we're not paying any attention to something else. And one of the things I would say is that we were having a lot of coverage of, the peace deal in Israel, which
Mhm.
then seemed to fall apart, but then quickly disappeared from the news, right? So do you have any idea what's going on in Israel right now?
There's a lot.
Palestine?
Well, and
Gaza?
not like I did before. And I'm trying to be careful because I am generally speaking, I'm from. It's so hard to kind of dig into this because my views on Israel are very nuanced. But I've been pretty staunchly. I don't even want to say the pro-Israel camp, but I've been pretty staunchly generally on the side of Israel since October 7th, but that's complicated because then you say something like that and people are like, "Oh, well you're always pro-Israel." But then there were some recent arson attacks which based on what I've read thus far, um yeah, I don't support that. I, like not at all.
Well, and I wasn't meaning for us to have to get into a deep discussion about that because I know that's a very my position is somewhat nuanced as well and all of that.
I can finish my point because yeah, I don't that's a whole nother podcast. But basically it's like I would generally up until very recently, I'll use the Al Shifa Hospital as an example because this was kind of the best example of my style of information verification. So you'll probably remember this. It came out Israel attacks the Al Shifa Hospital in Gaza. It's like, okay, um, I don't buy that, so I'm gonna wait for more information. And then it turns out that, well, the hospital wasn't hit, it was actually in the parking lot. And then it turns out that it wasn't an Israeli strike. It was actually a strike from another. It wasn't Hamas, but it was another. I can't remember the name of this particular outfit, but it was a rocket launch that fell short of its target inside Israel and just so happened to hit the parking lot in Al Shifa. And that, in and of itself, is kind of crazy how quickly that narrative gets spun both ways. To be fair, but I always point out one of these areas has a free press, the other one doesn't. So I think it was Douglas Murray who said that. And it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, that's worth considering. You do have one side that has newspapers that often criticize the administration and the government, and then you have another side that you can only get information from one source, which is kind of step one of believing information is where's it coming from and how many different sources are available to you. But so that's kind of but to answer your question, not a lot lately.
No, and my point in raising that is then I can go on to Ukraine next and ask you, what happened there, right? There were supposed to be some peace talks, and then Putin was supposed to talk to President Trump, and then that got canceled. But
Mhm.
what's going on in Ukraine?
I'm trying to remember the latest and greatest, but I can't pull it off the top of my head. So I see I'm picking up what you're putting down.
So we're being pulled to look at this, and the question is why and what changed. And I really have been scratching my head and can't really understand it either. But I think with the delay in getting it out, one thing that someone had mentioned is that this bill does have an exception for any information in an ongoing investigation, right?
So all the main perpetrators will still remain.
Well, and Trump just directed Pam Bondi to then open investigations into any Democrat that is mentioned. I think it's the way that's the way he phrased it. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but
Yeah.
um, because I don't know the exact what he said exactly what he said. But I think we've gotten to a point there was enough delay in doing this that every Democrat is going to say, well, they just scrubbed the files of anything that implicated any Republican. And any Republican now is going to say, oh, well, they're hiding all the Democrats because of open investigations or something. So I don't know what we're going to actually get out of this, but I do know that it took attention away from lots of things that were going good from a Trump administration perspective and then weren't maybe going so good. And so often when the narrative changes like that, it's to distract us from something else.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, sort of
but
my sort of loose conspiracy theory with the Epstein files was basically that they got a list of people, and these are big names, and the time, and I don't even they think Trump is guilty of anything, but I'm a little bit less inclined to say he's guilty of nothing with some of the accusations that have come to light from those emails. But again, it's coming from Jeffrey Epstein, so take it with a massive grain of salt. And it was also intended to be private between people that know each other. And how many of us, I mean, none of us joke about that in our private emails, but like we can be facetious. Human beings can be facetious.
well, and
But
we of course can't ask him now, obviously. Right?
precisely, but sort of my conspiracy theory was that, which I don't think it's a conspiracy theory, by the way. I think this is actually what happened, but I yet have the evidence to say definitively this is what happened, hence conspiracy theory. But I think there's a lot of big names in that list. And when they were talking about releasing the whole thing, they got some phone calls and were basically, I mean, we're talking big people, forces in the economy, forces in intergovernmental relations around the world that basically said, don't release it or you're going down too.
And
That's my conspiracy theory.
I think that's very likely could be the case. I think that there is definitely blackmail schemes that keep politicians in line. And I think that if they can't get a politician to play in any of those schemes, they will just frame them in
Well, either that or they'll just get him out by dumping money into an opposing candidate who will play ball. Like we've seen that happen so many times. And
yeah. And
unfortunately, political office can and often is bought, can be and often is bought. So,
yeah, and so I mean, um, my gut and based on the evidence that I personally have seen is that President Trump was not involved in trafficking of young women or involved in any illegal activities with underage trafficking victims. However,
Seems that does seem to be the case insofar as he's directed people to release everything.
however, and my understanding, and it's all sort of, all the secrecy behind it makes it hard to know a lot of these things, but my understanding is that he kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago, um, and cooperated in his first arrest.
Hmm. Which a
That
lot of people don't even know about his first arrest, but is that, oh, you want to get mad? Read about his first arrest.
I mean, yeah, because there was a botched probably search and search warrant, and things were hidden, and we could have had a lot more evidence and all these things. But if that is all true, what I just said, um, that's really odd behavior for someone who was involved, unless there was some uh, plea or some, immunity agreement or something that we are not privy to. But I just think that if all of that is true, which I haven't seen anything to dispute that, my gut tells me that there are a lot of names in those files that are going to rock politics, business, um, philanthropic
Yeah.
communities.
Oh,
And
yeah, I agree.
um, this is the skeptical and the political strategist in me, Jake, that if all of that came out right after Trump got into office, he would accomplish nothing, because that would suck all the air out of the entire world. And that perhaps the delay was to get some of these other things accomplished that he has been working on over the past year.
I could possibly see that. I think Justin's hitting it on the head here. Because he's making a couple jokes, which you're funny, but but he said, joking aside, I believe he's in them enough to look bad, but not enough to be incriminating. And yeah, I think that's probably the case because it's no secret that Trump and Epstein were at one time they were at least cordially friendly to one another, if not. I don't want to say he was friendly with Jeffrey Epstein, but I mean they knew each other. That's clear.
Mhm.
And when you know Donald Trump, that's not just like a, oh yeah, we get together and play golf once every 6 months. No, I mean that's when you know people like that, it's a little bit more involved. But I'm with you. Just don't see him directing them to vote for the release of them if there's something incriminating in there. But I can understand him being like, I kind of don't love that my name's mentioned all this time, but for all Trump knows, he would have had no idea that they were talking about him that much.
Yeah, and again, out of context, without the ability to verify, is this sarcastic? Are you joking?
Are you using
I
intense political rhetoric?
Yeah, or so we're never gonna know necessarily exactly what all of these meant for sure. Um, and I do think, there is probably he's mentioned in it. And as you say, if you move in those circles, you move in those circles. You're gonna be around all those people. So I don't, I think that there may have been, when you are a president, and especially if you're a lame duck, you can't get reelected, you have 18 months pretty much to get anything done. You're most likely to lose the majorities that you have in the House and Senate. It's very
Hmm.
rare that you don't lose some in the midterms. And so did he want his 18 months that he has spent talking about Epstein when he had a lot of other things he has been working to accomplish? Probably not. Is this maybe going to be something that will actually be really good to have out there for the midterms for the Republicans? Maybe, depending
And
on
so
the name
depends
that
on
are
who's
in
in
the
there.
files, but they could be. So Sadly, so much of what happens in Washington is all about the politics and the optics, Jake. It's not about really what's right or what's good or what's true. It's about how is this going to look and how is it going to affect our electoral chances. The truth is that if he can maintain his majority and especially if he could grow the majority in the Senate because of the 60 vote threshold, he could get another 2 years, to accomplish some things. But it's very rare that you see that happen in
Yeah,
midterm election.
I'm glad you brought that up because I'm getting a lot. Well, I shouldn't say I'm getting a lot of pushback. I'm getting some pushback from people because I'm saying I'm just looking at how things are right now, and I'm calling for basically a blue wave in the midterms. Just looking at optically, and it's no hard and fast evidence, but it's like looking at discussions that are taking place online, how the news is covering things, what they're putting out there, and I just optically the Trump administration does not look super great right now, and you still have a lot of pressure on the economy, which a lot of much smarter people than I have said repeatedly that if Trump could fix the economy, then he's got a shot. But if the economy doesn't improve dramatically since when he gets into office, it's going to be a tough battle in those midterms. And I mean, we still have another year, so a lot can happen in a year. But as I always put it, if the elections were tomorrow, I think there'd be a massive blue wave. So I'm glad you brought that up because you're absolutely right. It's most of this is just optics.
It is because how long have these files been sitting there? It's not like this is, fresh. So the timing of it could mean something. And I think you're not wrong. I mean, I think people are going to be voting based on what their pocketbooks, what their wallets are telling them. Can they afford to feed their family? Can they do those things? But I will say that a year is so long in
It's a
politics.
long time.
People's memories continue to get shorter and shorter and shorter. And as I said, we talked for a minute about Israel, and then I mentioned Ukraine. People just forgot about it. I don't think people are thinking about Ukraine. How much money have we directed to Ukraine? And um, I mean, shouldn't Putin have been invading? I'm joking, like when I say
Yeah.
this, but Poland and the rest of NATO by now, if everything we had been told was true, or
Well, that
something. You know what I'm saying? I'm
yeah,
just
yeah, but
saying
that
that.
but that's another funny thing is because like again when I wouldn't even call myself a student of history, but I'm an amateur. I'm a history enthusiast. And anytime they were talking about, like Putin's going to invade Poland next, I would always say, he's not that stupid because an invasion of a NATO country is an invasion of NATO.
Correct. I mean, I agree with you. I talk about this in my book because of the nature of the way media covered this situation. You know, um, a big part of why he actually invaded is that Zelensky was trying to get Ukraine into NATO,
Into NATO,
um,
yeah.
actively doing that and talking about it. And Putin sort of drew a red line and it didn't stop him. And I say to people, well, imagine if Russia was, trying to form a security pact with Mexico, right? And was going to be putting their troops and nukes right on our southern border. You think we would just sit there and let them do that?
Well, in
So
in direct violation of it was the Minsk Accords, wasn't it?
So my understanding is nothing in writing ever happened. Well, yes, in violation of the Minsk Accords, but also in violation of the oral agreement when the Soviet Union dissolved that NATO wouldn't move eastward at all, and all that was
Well, and
left,
that didn't
Ukraine.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So my only point in raising that is that people's memories are so short, and when the media switches and tells you to think about something else, and the social media environment follows suit, so that everybody was talking about Epstein again, then people forget. So much could happen between now and then. And, there could always be an October surprise, a suppressed Hunter Biden laptop story, all the things that happen that could really change the dynamic of the midterms. But I do agree with you that if they were held tomorrow, I do think that the Republicans would be in some trouble because, a big part of why people definitely wanted a change from Biden was inflation and what was
Mhm.
going on with the ability to feed people's families. And so, um, Trump's strategies, I think that in the long run, getting energy prices down, tariffs, they could have a huge impact positively. I think in the short term, we're seeing some challenges with that. I know for me, any product that I buy at the grocery store that's imported does cost more money, you know? And so I guess it'll be interesting to see. I live in Virginia, and we got a very clear message here in Virginia in our governor's race that was very blue. It was, a 16-point trolloping, I'm sad to say, but
Was that was one of the instances I was going to point to actually, and it's like now I'm saying this, and I I wish I wasn't right, but yeah, because I've been saying that, and then you had the mayoral race in New York City, you had the gubernatorial races in New Jersey and Virginia, and it's like here's case study, guys, and the most frustrating part of this. I say it repeatedly. I'm not Trump's biggest fan, but I did vote for him. And the reason I voted for him was because I could not, and I don't think the nation could have taken another Biden administration. I don't think it was going to be a good show. Unfortunately, if I can make one criticism about this current Trump administration, is they don't listen to anyone other than their insular group because they've been being warned about this for a long time. And now they have proof of their optical problems, which they could fix. Actually, I take that back. I think right now, I don't think they could fix it. But earlier, I think they could have pivoted and really softened. They still could have gotten their major agenda points done just in a different way. But now I think it's probably too late to dissuade the actual moderate independents. So what I'm scared of is that they're just going to keep hammering in at their base and they're just going to keep alienating because now you have Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Diehard Republicans, Marjorie Taylor Greene especially, now kind of not turning away fully, but certainly separating from the MAGA movement on this issue. And that should be very concerning for them, but I don't think they're watching.
yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me to put my head into where they are. I will say though, I wouldn't read too much about the Virginia or New Jersey um governor races. New Jersey is pretty blue, just in general. Here in Virginia, it's a weird situation because we can't have the incumbent can't run again, and we tend to go back and forth and back and forth. Um,
That's a good
and
point because remember your electoral maps every year. Virginia's always like, or at least for the past few, it's like, where are they going to go?
Yeah, because what we have is we have a lot of rural areas where I live, and then Northern Virginia is almost all government employees, government contractors who are always voting for the Democrats. So it's just a matter of turnout, and I think that's the big issue: is what are the Republicans going to do between now and the midterms to really turn the base out? Um, and I'm not sure. A lot. We'll have to see a lot going on. I think that there's a lot of sort of splitting on the right now too, right? And that is concerning for the next election, in terms of what does that mean. And it's not, I guess, a very good look. It's not people in the Trump administration. It's among all the pundits and all the influencers and all of
It's
the
more,
broadcasters.
it is more so there, but I'm pointing to Marjorie Taylor Greene just because that one seems to be very loud and more than a little surprising. But I also understand why she would do that based on what's being presented out here. But she was doing this before the Epstein files, by the way. I don't think people are realizing that she was already she was citing economic concerns before this second or third go around was happening.
Yeah, and she was also, I mean, this was in the midst of the Epstein files, but she was also talking about the fact, like, where's my party's plan to fix healthcare, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, I think on the
Valid
one hand,
question.
I like to see it. I like to see these questions being raised, I don't encourage cult-like obedience on either side of the aisle since I left one side because of what I saw.
Hmm.
Um, on the other hand, it is a very challenging environment in which to have anybody sort of abandoning the party line right now because the margins are so slim to begin with in both the House and the Senate. And it does create not great optics if that's something that you care about.
This is true, and it's a legitimate question though, because moments like these, they always make me think of like, how do I word this? They always make me think of like those moments where it's like, are you there may be a decision that you have to make that's better for like the common good of your group, but you may feel morally conflicted about it. And that's in a vacuum, some people will be like, well, I would always do the right thing. It's not so easy because the consequences could be very real for your group or your party. But there are some people in the Republican Party that I think are getting to a point where it's just like, I'm getting close to that moral line where I can't adhere to this. And that's the danger zone for them. Unfortunately, it will probably lead to them not being reelected for them, but not necessarily for the Republican Party. But a quick note to anyone watching the podcast tonight, Lisa mentioned her book. If you would like to get your copy of it, Deprogramming Democrats and Uneducating the Elites, you can use the link in the description to get your copy on Amazon.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I think here's the other thing. The question about what is the healthcare plan is a huge question because what I mean, I'll full disclosure, I worked hard to get Obamacare passed. That was part of what I did. And it was a huge mistake. It was feeding more money into a very broken system. And I am really appreciative of what Secretary Kennedy is doing in trying to actually address health in the country instead of feeding insurance and pharmaceutical companies. Um, at the same time, like I haven't heard a plan to fix the out-of-pocket problems that people have. I mean, President Trump did talk about instead of giving the subsidies to the insurance companies, giving them to people and letting those people use the money. But our system is so bloated and there's so much money going to um, people whose only job it is to stand between you and care, basically, that I think something bigger, needs to be done.
Well, I think the biggest thing they could do, well, not the biggest, but I think one of the fastest things they could do is pass some form of legislation that mandates price transparency.
I think that would really help. I've seen a number of these videos of doctors calling around to ask
Hmm.
um, for prices, for patients. And one of the things that's really crazy is that actually the uninsured price is usually like way, 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 way less.
It depends because it's funny because I was just I went down like a 2 day rabbit hole on this. It really depends because oftentimes when you do that, and I actually fell victim to this happened to me, so I have firsthand experience with this. Um, really quick, I'll share the story. This is kind of what got me really thinking about healthcare. So a couple years ago, I'm in my Krav Maga class. I step wrong, I tweak my knee, and I've got a history of knee injuries, so I'm freaking out. But it hurts, but I can walk, which is weird because all my knee injuries before were like no weight, it crumbles. So I was paranoid, but I could walk with pain. So I went to get it looked at, and I found actually, which this is another healthcare trend that I'm seeing more of, and I'm really liking it. I went to a knee specialist who is in a hospital, but it's his practice, and it's significantly affordable, but he only looks at knees. So I go there, and older gentleman, you can tell he's been doing this for a while. He's been doing this for ages. Knows everything you can know about the human knee. And he looks at my knees, and thank God he x-rayed both of them because I actually found out my knees naturally go more of a 45-degree angle. So one of my surgeries was probably not necessary had they only x-rayed the other knee. But he told me before we found this out, he asked me what insurance company are you with, and I said I don't have insurance. And then he said, okay, new plan. We're not going to do the MRI here. You're going to go to this place, and they're going to charge you $132 as opposed to the like 2000 plus if the hospital had done it. And now what he did tell me, he said the bulk of that isn't even the machine, it's paying the doctor to look at it. Go there, they'll give you they won't look at it, they'll just put it on a thumb drive, bring it back to me and I will look at it and we just won't tell the hospital that I did that. Which is wild to me. It's absolutely
It,
wild to me.
it is wild. I mean, it's all sorts of things. So it is a mess of pricing. It's a mess of all of that. And our insurance is just really weird in this
It's
country
wonky.
too.
With health insurance, it's not even insurance. It's this weird payment assistance model that kind of really doesn't make sense if you think about it for more than 2 seconds. And the weird thing about our pricing is the hospitals inflate the prices because the insurance companies negotiate them down so far. But then it becomes a catch 22 because the people that don't have insurance and don't fight the billing at all can end up paying those non-insurance inflated prices. And it's so
And
wild.
but it's a crapshoot
It
because, like
is.
I said, I've heard these doctors like, if someone had insurance, like, I saw one was for labor and delivery for a baby, and it was like 6,500 was the insurance, and 1,000 was if you didn't have insurance. We'll give you a discounted price. So it's all over the place, and it's a mess. And then there's the thing that, like, with so many things, it's people. There are a lot of things that are lifestyle related.
Very much
And
so.
we don't do a good job of encouraging lifestyle changes. Our medical system doesn't. And so, you know, what Obamacare tried to do was spread the risk, right? So that healthy people had to buy these full-blown insurance plans that they probably don't want and don't need. And there were all sorts of shady insurance practices before, that it addressed. Like, if I'm paying for insurance, there should not be a lifetime limit on my coverage, right? I mean, it got rid of that. I support that, I guess, if we're in this insurance model. It got rid of a practice called rescission, which was basically, oh, look, you're sick, so now we're going to take your coverage away because you got sick, which is exactly why I had coverage in the first place, right? So
Right.
there were things that sort of made sense, but what it did was sort of slap a band-aid, to use a medical, analogy,
Band-aid that
on,
costs $45.
yeah, for along with the $100 aspirin that you're going to take or whatever, but like,
Right.
slap a band-aid on a patient that was hemorrhaging, right? And we're continuing to hemorrhage. Um, And so I think, like, we need to do something bigger to fix it. Um, and I don't know if, like, the Republicans thought they were losing the shutdown messaging, and that's why they shifted to Epstein too. Is like, okay, well, So there's a lot of things that could have played into it. And the reason I went to the shutdown is that is extended subsidies is part of what the
Hmm.
for Obamacare is part of what the shutdown supposedly happened
Well,
because
but
of.
didn't the Democrats kind of, and I could be wrong here, but didn't the Democrats kind of quote unquote lose that one because they ended up agreeing to reopening the government without the extension of those subsidies, or did something happen kind of cloak and dagger
Um,
style?
they got an agreement to have a vote on
That's
extending.
okay. Yep, you say that, and I
So
remember that now.
but I mean, I think before the government reopened, it, there was a lot of going back and forth about who's to blame, but I
Yeah,
think a lot of people were thinking that the Republicans were losing that. And so
which is kind of wild if you think about it, because I always I viewed the Democrats as losing that one pretty heartily.
I agree with you. I guess there was polling that was
Yeah,
not
but
going
but
favorably for the Republicans, but
but I'm also here, Ron Swanson over here. When the government shuts down, I'm just like, ooh,
yeah, I mean, I jokingly have said to people, did you notice that the government was shut down? No? Oh, okay. Me
you
neither.
would if you worked for them, but other than that, I'm kind of like, yeah, I do.
Or if you got benefits that you couldn't be paid.
Correct, yeah. But I mean, there was a bunch of stuff that Trump was either the Trump administration was either ordered to pay or figured out a way to make work. So I mean, this was the longest government shutdown in history, if I'm not
Correct.
mistaken. I
Yeah.
didn't notice.
No, most people don't, and like our one could say that our appropriations process is broken, but one could also say that it's broken by design, and lobbyists love it this way because it's
Hmm.
so much easier to get stuff in. Does anyone even know what was in the bill that got passed?
No, a few people were crying foul because they were quote unquote not made aware of it until they were on the floor voting. Because I guess they slipped something in there. And that's another piece of legislation I would like to see is that bills cannot exceed X number of pages, because if you can't explain what you want to do in 50 pages, then you're fired.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. I mean, it's gotten so um gridlocked in Congress that if you limited it like that, oh my gosh, it'd be really hard. But people would actually have an understanding of what is in the bills and what they're voting on and those kind of things, my own personal belief is that we need to get rid of most of the federal government and return things back to the states, and then there'd be a lot less they need to be legislating on, and our founding fathers would be smiling at us if we did.
At
But
least a little bit more than they are right now.
yeah, well, I mean, we've gotten so far away from their vision
Yeah.
of what they foresaw for this country, of like 50 or how many ever independent states join together for mutual defense and mutual economic prosperity, and beyond that, operating almost as their own little labs of innovation countries, which
Mhm.
we can't do given the heavy regulatory burden from the feds.
Isn't that true? But it's funny because my friend Justin, who is awesome and comments on every video that we do, thank you, my friend. Um, he's in Canada, and he's the friend that we jokingly say I'm a dirty capitalist and he's a filthy socialist. But joking
Mm-hmm.
aside, he is more liberal than I, but that's not surprising. He's in Canada. We'll let it go. They're loony up there. They're loony up there in the Great White North. But he and I were having a conversation about, like, because one of the things Zoran Mamdani wanted to do is he's talking about the government owned grocery stores, which it I don't think that's going to happen. But the thing I said, I was like, well, you know what though? Like, I don't live in like, this sounds callous, but there is a point here. Like, I don't live in New York City. I really don't care. Let him try it. If it works, it works. I don't think it will work, but let him try it. And that's kind of what we're supposed to do in the various states. Because, like, for example, another thing, a lot of people don't know this, Tennessee has 2-year free college tuition to in-state residents. and it seems to be
Yeah,
working for them.
I think that that is what they're supposed to do. But here's what shouldn't happen is the federal government should not bail New York out if this goes wrong, and
100% agree. Yep,
that's the big problem. And as long as whatever they want to do does not run afoul of the Constitution, right?
correct. Yeah,
So, equal protection has to apply,
it does. Yep,
and all of those things. So if that's what New York wants, more power to them. That means I probably won't go visit New York, let alone live
but
there.
fair point. But that's part of seeing if it works, right? Is
Yeah, and
yeah.
I don't think it will, and
I don't think it will
it,
either, but
I mostly don't think he's going to be able to do anything
I,
that
I
he
I think
wanted to.
Hochul's pretty well kiboshed anything that requires states involvement. I mean, she's
And things like free buses would require state
correct.
involvement, and
Correct.
tax changes would require state involvement, and things like that. So I think so I can't believe I might say this, but good for Governor Hochul, because I haven't been a big fan of
I
hers
was going to say,
in the
right, that's a
past.
sentence. That's a sentence you never
Yeah.
thought you'd say.
No, not really, but I guess there's always could be worse, right? And I think that that is a big part of why we face so many of these challenges is that we're trying to run a 340 million people country where we shouldn't be having so many policies that apply so broadly to everyone.
Agree.
Trying to say California and Alabama should have all the same rules for their citizens is silly.
It's
Um,
ridiculous.
and it's definitely not what our founders intended. So I think that, in the long run, that's one of the ways that we can fix all of this. I mean, the truth about it is from the health insurance part, the federal government should not have been involved in that at all.
Agreed.
I will remind people of this very much forgotten amendment called the 10th Amendment to our Constitution, which basically says if we didn't spell it out in the previous part of the Constitution, then it belongs to the states and the people and not the federal government. And health, up until the Affordable Care Act, was one of those things, which is why you have doctors licensed by states, not by federal government. That is
Hmm.
why before then, um, if you lived in Alabama and moved to Tennessee, you had to get brand new insurance because Alabama had different insurance rules than Tennessee and things like that. And while I understand the thinking behind sort of normal nationalizing it, at the same time, it has created a lot of problems, and it is in my view unconstitutional. And
I
part
think you can
of
make a case for that, honestly. I mean, they tried, but um, I think you can make a pretty strong case for that.
yeah, I think Chief Justice Roberts really disappointed everyone on that particular decision, who was on the right, and I thought he was a hero at the time because I was yay
Well,
ACA.
well,
But
believe you me, he's been disappointing me for the past couple of years. So
yeah, I think there are some decisions which I am not too pleased about from him either. I think part of what is has gotten so out of control is that Congress was given the right to spend money and tax, and so the power of the purse is where it sort of gets abused, and that's where he decided on this particular one. So, but all of that is sort of, I guess, to circle back to where we started, all of that, I think, feeds into why you have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, saying we have to do something about this. I mean, I've seen people talking about, $15,000 a year for insurance, and that's
hmm
with like a 15, another $5,000 deductible before you even get any help and all of that. And, um, I think come midterms, if something isn't done about the economic situation, as you were saying, the Republicans may face a pretty pretty stiff wind that they're
Oh
trying to
yeah.
sail through.
Well, and the true shame of this, and this has been kind of a repeating theme, at least as long as I've been alive and aware of politics, is it seems to me oftentimes the Republican Party will let an issue get so bad to the point where even if they have a good idea to fix it, that implementation becomes too painful in the short term to even be implemented. So it's politically unpopular. So then they lose. And then the Democrats come in and say, oh, look, here's some free or here's some patchwork, but it feels good now. And they'll use buzzwords like, but and some of it's true, which is why it's even more frustrating because it's like you will no longer be denied care. You can be on your parents' insurance till 26, which I actually agreed with because I'm over here. I'm like, if I'm paying for it, I should be able to put whoever the hell I want on my health insurance plan, regardless of age. If I'm paying for it, like that seems a little silly to have a very strange rule. But you know, it comes at the expense of typically the middle class. And a lot of people don't realize that because if you look at it, who's actually subsidizing the Affordable Care Act? Well, it certainly isn't the poor, and it certainly isn't the majority of it's not coming from the ultra rich billionaires, which the left likes to say it's coming from. It's coming from the middle class.
It is, and yeah, I think you can only put so much on the backs of the middle class though before they break, and we're
And
seeing
you're
a
feeling it.
hollowing
Yeah.
out of the middle class. We're really turning into haves and have-nots even more than we used to be. And I don't even know what middle class means anymore, to be honest with you, in this country. I don't know what the uh, latest statistics are, but like so much of our population is paycheck to paycheck. They're living paycheck to paycheck. They can't save. Last time, this was a few years ago, and COVID, I think, led to a big increase in savings that people had, but I think we're back to pre-COVID savings levels now because people exhausted everything.
Hmm.
And like 60 to 70% of this country could not afford $1,000 emergency.
That's true. Now, and my own personal theory. I think a lot of that, I'd say probably the majority of that is just financial illiteracy and this I shouldn't say this because I just bought a very large house. But it was a very large house that we could afford. It was at the top, but in this market, the fact that you can afford a house is a small miracle. And I don't blame people for that. But like the not being able to save and I'm having many conversations with my wife about lifestyle creep and saying like just because we have a big house doesn't mean we have to furnish it with a lot of big things because that's the trap that a lot of people fall into. Like we can afford this, but as long as we don't get too carried away. And it
And it's
happens.
hard. There
Yeah, it's
is
hard.
there is the pressure to sort of keep up with the Joneses. There's the pressure of, oh, there's a brand new iPhone and there's a brand new this, and I want a bigger car and all of
Mhm.
that. And I'm not saying that the inability to save is completely faultless on the people that aren't saving, but there are a lot of people who literally do not have
This
extra
is this
at
is
all.
true. This is 100% true. And it's like you said, it's a mixed bag. Well, you didn't say that, but that's the conclusion we're coming to. It's a mixed bag. So it's part and parcel, and it's coming from a lot of different directions. But what you can't argue with is the fact that, yes, there's a lot of economic pressure on the middle class, and they're not getting any more help, but they're getting a lot more of their money taken away, whether it be via the market through inflation or whether it be increased taxes or tax burdens or just increased prices of essentials like healthcare, like gas, like groceries, all that. Because the middle class doesn't get any subsidies for groceries.
No, no, the middle class doesn't get subsidies for much of anything. They're sort of in the middle. They're just, yeah. And so I think, like I said, I think you've hit the nail on the head that if they don't do something about economics, we're going to see a challenging situation for the Republicans in the midterm. And I think, like I said, I think Trump has maybe another 6 months where he might be able to accomplish more than he has. You know, um, I do think there were some things in the big, beautiful bill that may help some on the economy. I think part of the challenge is that any of the strategies he's implementing have some short-term pain for long-term gain, as you were talking about. And the question is, will the gain come soon enough for it to happen before the midterms? You know, tariffs, it's going to take a while for uh, production facilities to return to the US, for example, or those kind of things. Although we have seen some movement based on the tariffs of I know some Canadian firms have moved to the US and things like that, and other ones are. Um, but it's a question of when does that happen? How fast does it happen? And um, I don't know. I'm not even sure if the Supreme Court's going to gut Trump's tariff authority. I'm not sure about
I
that either.
I don't
So,
know, but part of it, and I'm feeling this in my day-to-day business, part of the problem economically right now, and it doesn't make sense, like to be fair, it shouldn't be happening this way, but for some reason it is. People are reluctant to spend money because they're afraid of the impending tariffs. Now, I understand why suppliers are doing that because they don't want to get hit with the tariff not when they order the product, but when they have to go to port to get it, because that's where you pay the tariff. So they don't want to be expecting to pay, a substantially less import duty and then get hit with wherever it's coming from, 15 to 20 to sometimes up to 50. But the average consumer, you would think, and it's throwing me for a loop, you would think they'd be spending now to try to avoid the impending tariff, but for some reason they aren't, and that could just be the economic pressures that are already there. It could be a misunderstanding of how these tariffs are working, but for whatever reason, they're not spending like you think they would be in response to the tariffs. And it's weird. I can't explain it.
yeah, I mean, I think if you talk to financial analysts and people who are there's a lot going on in the economy that just doesn't make any sense. You know, the stock market seems to like think everything is great most of the time and just keeps going up. I think it's a lot of it is all everybody's all in on AI. And especially on is it Stan I always forget the Standard and Poor's is the tech one. Is that
The
mostly
S&P 500, it's
yeah,
not
that's
just tech, but
but it is that's where it's heavy. I think there are seven stocks that um account for the majority of the S&P's growth over the past like 4 years.
oh yeah, I would definitely, and there's no question there is an AI bubble, and I'll tell you right now, I don't look forward to the day when that thing pops, and it's going to, and it's going to be
I mean,
ugly.
that's gonna pop. We have a lot of bubbles,
Yeah,
and they're all floating around, and if they all pop at once, we're in for a world of hurt. So
yeah.
and then there's the idea, and I don't know when this month this it happens, but that, um, there's I think it's something, is it like $6 trillion of our debt is coming due and needs to be renegotiated?
I think that's six. I
Um,
think that's right. Six
I think
trillion.
it's around like a sixth of our debt. We're at like 36 trillion now
Well, yeah,
in
yeah. And we're
in
we're
debt.
gonna and we're gonna be, if we're not already there. I don't think we're there yet. I think they said by 2030 we're gonna reach a point where our interest payments on the debt will exceed our current defense spending levels.
So yeah, we've got a lot of things going on in the economy, and I think AI is also going to play some role in, there have been a lot of layoffs, a lot of strange things happening with that as well. So that is all to say that I also am very unclear of how well the economic indicators that we use to exhibit the strength of our economy actually measure that anymore.
Yeah, it does not seem to line up because stock market's doing great, but then it's kind of like, and like I don't for a minute, like I'm in a very good situation comparatively speaking, but I feel it. I feel it
Yeah, I
when I go to
mean,
the grocery store, so I can only imagine how people that aren't doing as well as I am right now, and I've been there, trust me, I've been there. I know what it's like to look at your electric bill and your gas bill and figure out, do I want to be cold or do I want to be in the dark?
yeah, and there are a lot of people who are having to make those choices, and something is going to give. I just don't know exactly what it is or how it is. But the truth of it is that you just can't keep printing money and spending money and expect it not to have an impact. I mean, COVID, they spent $2 trillion, and a lot of that went to very wealthy people in the PPP loans or what have
Mhm.
you, that didn't need to get paid back as long as they did certain things. So, and I think especially for young people, the economy that they face right now is terrible, and so I don't know if I were trying to give advice to the administration or to Congress, I don't know what I would advise them to do except figure out some way to improve the economic situation of the average American.
Which I think the best thing they could do, especially long term, I think short term it would be painful. But I think long term, it's like you said, the more control that's taken away from the federal government, particularly monetarily, I think long term will be better for the economy. But I think immediately there would be some pains there because a lot of money flows in and out of the federal government. So I think short term there would be a lot of confusion and pain because unfortunately we've gotten so used to how this system is that there would be people that would not be willing or at least would resist that change even if it's for their benefit.
Well, it's interesting how our conversation all kind of fits together because I was looking at this and almost 18% of our GDP is healthcare spending. And
Woo.
yeah. And a very large percentage, I don't want to mix this up, but a very large percent of that is government spending through the Medicare program, Medicaid program, and the subsidies. I think it might be 70% of that is. So here's the question I would ask. Is government spending actually gross domestic product?
I think it
Is it
depends on who you ask.
And in my opinion, this is another reason why I think it's not actually reflective of a productive economy if one out of every $5 that is supposedly being generated is specifically coming from federal taxation and spending. Are we actually producing anything? What is the product?
Right.
Uh, Government. So, but I also think that's why you want to be really careful when you're messing around with healthcare and insurance and all of that, because you are talking about almost 1/5 of our economy. And that's significant.
No, this is true. And I'm going to take a quick moment. Speaking of producing, I want to let everybody who's listening to this or watching this right now, if you've ever had an idea for a podcast, we can help you. And here's a quick video to tell you more information about that.
Hey, so let's talk about that amazing idea you've got. The one that's always in the back of your mind. Well, it absolutely deserves to be heard. Today, we're going to look at a network that's built to do just that, to amplify your voice and make that idea a reality. Seriously, think about it for a second. What's that one thing you're passionate about? That one story that only you can tell? We all have that topic we could just talk about for hours on end, right? But there's a catch. That's the big question, isn't it? It's the hurdle that stops so many fantastic ideas cold. The how of it all can feel, well, super overwhelming and honestly a little intimidating. So what if you had a partner to help you get over that hurdle? Well, let's meet Already Media. It's a podcast network, and its whole mission is to help creators like you launch and grow their shows. Think of them as your partner in crime, helping with the tough stuff so you can just focus on being creative. Now, anyone can say they'll help, right? But the real proof is in the community they've built. And you've got shows that dive into pop culture and revisit those childhood scares, like the Goosebumps crew, sitting right alongside shows that give you these sharp business insights, like Startup Cores with Salt, Arizona. And the list just keeps going. There are shows about self-improvement, deep dives into the magic of Broadway, even really academic explorations of classical music. It just goes to show you there's a space for every single kind of creator. It shows that no topic is too niche or, frankly, too bold. And this isn't just some static library of old shows. It's a living, breathing community. It's not just about making content, it's about celebrating it. For instance, they even host the annual Artie Awards to recognize the best shows on the network. And just to show you how active it is, here's the latest episode from the Average Intelligence podcast, which just dropped. Seeing this really drives home that the network is constantly platforming its creators and their brand new work. So after seeing all of this, the question is pretty simple. You've got the idea. You've seen that there's a community waiting. Are you ready to take that step and finally share your voice? And here's how you do it. The whole path from idea to launch is laid out for you right there. It's not just about podcasts. It's about the stories and the knowledge and the passion inside all of us. So, what's yours?
So if you've got an idea for a podcast, use the second link in the description, sends an email directly to me, and we'll figure out how to help you get it off the ground. And we were talking off air while a really, really nice commercial was airing about how it's uh, it's very disingenuous to say that Trump has ever had an easy go of a presidency. Whether you love him or hate him, like I don't think you can honestly say that he's not been met with resistance immediately and specifically from the media because you can't truthfully say that the media has not been anti-Trump from day one.
No, I mean, Harvard did a study on media coverage during the first 100 days of his first administration, and over 80% of the coverage was negative. CNN's was 93% negative of Trump, and some weeks it was over 90%, and that was significantly worse than every other modern 21st century president. So, they definitely have had it out for him. It's kind of funny because the only network that could have been considered somewhat fair would be Fox, as fair and balanced. That was like 52% positive and 48% negative. And if you talk to anyone on the left, they would say Fox is always pro-Trump, and that is just not even true. You certainly can't say Harvard is a pro-Trump source either. So this was I think it's Shorenstein Center on Media and Politics or something like that that did this study. Yeah, I think it's definitely fair to say that the deep state definitely pulled out all the stops to try to stop him, and um, they continue to do so. So
Yeah.
I don't know what I think there's a lot going on, and I don't if I like from the economic standpoint, um I know he floated a few ideas over last weekend, some that I really didn't like the 50-year
I was
mortgage.
going to say, oh, like the 50-year mortgage.
Yeah, that one, it's bad enough that with property taxes, you don't ever really, you still pay rent sort of to the government to keep your property, even if you don't have a mortgage. But the idea that you have a mortgage for 50 years, is kind of crazy. On the other hand, there has to be, as you were mentioning, there has to be something that gets done for affordability for people. Um,
Well, and ironically, there's things that the market can do. One of the big ones is on like, and this is wild because I'm actually in my day job is in the home improvement industry. Builders have been incentivized for decades now to keep building bigger and bigger because people wanted bigger and bigger. Um, they got to start building smaller houses. They have to build more of them and they have to become cheaper, but nobody wants to do that because everybody wants to get the highest interest rate they can get to stay competitive on a mortgage for 30 years or 50 years. The banks will love those 50-year mortgages for the highest dollar house they can because it all comes down to how much money they're going to make. But I wouldn't even begin to direct somebody on how to do it. But if there were a builder or builders that could figure out a way to make even slightly smaller houses in a more affordable way that doesn't sacrifice safety, then they could make, because if you can build a comparable, I'll use mine as an example because the house I bought is just shy of 2,500 square feet. Um, and in this market we paid 325 for it. If somebody could figure out a way to make, a 2,000 square foot house for 225, I I guarantee you I would have gone for that house. Hands down, I would have gone for that.
Yeah, I mean they might have to be because I don't this was national statistics and I'm trying to remember how long ago it was. I was taking a look at the housing market and um at that point new homes were cheaper than comparable used
It's
homes.
it's kind of still true. A lot of that though, it's kind of weird. The homes themselves may not be a lower sticker price, but there's some ways that they can get you into a substantially lower interest rate for a new construction. There's a lot of like what do they call them? My lender would be so disappointed with me right now because she explained
Where
it to me and I can't remember.
they give points
Yeah,
or
yeah, 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 yeah. They're like purchase points.
points.
And we
Yeah.
did that to a certain extent. We put a little bit more down and got our interest rate down a couple like points. But
Well,
yeah,
and so I mean affordability if so the mortgage the 50-year mortgage idea I don't like it the um that much just be I mean because I mean a lot of people do refinance and things like that. I think there were some other features of the mortgage that they were floating that they were like assumable but also transferable so you could keep the terms of your mortgage if you bought a new house.
that's
um
that's an idea that they're floating around and I read about it. I don't necessarily hate that. And then I also learned, I didn't know this. I learned just the other day that 100-year mortgages are a thing in Japan and it becomes like as you pass it down to your family, they assume the house and the debt though. And I can
yeah,
understand why
I
that
don't
would
really like
I
that.
that makes Americans squeamish, and I totally understand why.
There's a very different um level of familial respect and I don't know what the word I want, but it's very different in Japan, I
It's
think.
very, yeah, it's a very different culture for sure.
Very
So
different.
it may it
But
may work just fine over there, but here I can't see that because the average person only lives in their home. I think it actually went up. I think it used to be 8 years. I think now the average is 11 years before they buy or move.
well, and the problem with a 50-year mortgage is you probably if you did that in 11 years, you wouldn't have paid principal down at all,
No,
really.
no,
It's
and
almost all
that's
interest.
yeah, and
So
that's the problem. And it really, like, I'm kind of surprised. Oh, actually, I'm not surprised. The vast majority of people are talking really, really bad about it, which go you guys. It means you can do math because it's like you're saving maybe 200 to 300 bucks a month, but you're paying almost double for the actual house at the end of the loan.
and if you sell at any point early, you might as well have been renting, and not have to pay all the maintenance and taxes and
Yeah.
all,
Well, and
that.
you're much more likely to go upside down on the loan if there's a drop in prices because the thing that's saving most people when they buy and then they sell a few years later is that home prices have gone up and they've paid enough equity to be able to have I mean that's what I did. I sold my old house and the proceeds from that went to the down payment of the new one and we're not anticipating moving ever, but you never know what's going to happen. So
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of bubbles, so not,
it's
I mean,
coming.
just it's coming. So I think I didn't like that idea. There was the tariff rebate idea,
Because we obviously didn't learn our lesson from COVID.
no, and I don't, I also think maybe wait till the Supreme Court actually decides on whether you have the authority to put those, because I think they heard oral argument on it. So,
Hmm.
or they accepted it or something. And so,
Something, yeah.
yeah, but all I'm saying is that the ideas I've heard so far that might make an economic difference are not great. And so,
Well, and
um,
it's one of those things where it's frustrating because they're those speaking about those ideas specifically, they feel more Democrat insofar as they're real short-term band-aids that feel good in the moment, but then it's like, oh great, we're gonna get a 50-year mortgage instead, and we're gonna save $300 a month. but then you realize how much more you're paying over time, or you realize what that $2,000 check is going to cost you in the long run, especially if the tariffs are ruled invalid under Trump and have to be issued through Congress, and Congress isn't going to do it. So,
Yeah, and I mean, at least I would say that if Trump's tariff authority is maintained, we're not printing money to give it to people, right? It's actually a different revenue source. At least I can say that. But at
yeah,
the same time, I feel uncomfortable for the same reason is that then we would have to print money to pay back the
yeah,
countries that, if and I'm not sure how the Supreme Court's going to go. I haven't actually looked at the statute, and done the deep research I would need to know. And with this court, I don't know them well enough on this kind of issue in order to say what they might come down on. But I think it's a of all I haven't like none of these ideas I don't think are going to make a big enough difference
I agree. I don't.
in the short term. And so but I also think what's the October surprise going to be? What's going to happen over the summer? Are we going to have chaos again in the streets?
Well,
There's all sorts of things. So
yeah, I will say this much, and it's no secret to those that watch this channel that I disagree vehemently on immigration policy, and more so on immigration enforcement with Trump, but on immigration policy as a whole. And I said a long time ago, I said I understand what Trump is saying he's trying to do, even though he's demonstrated that's not, in fact, what he was actually trying to do. But I said he needs to be very careful with this because whether it's accurate, what's being shown on screen or not, I think just the vast majority of the society is only going to be able to take so many videos of, people being thrown to the ground, people being put in handcuffs, whether it's justified or not. The optical thing is there. People are only going to be able to stomach seeing, like mothers taken away from children because they don't have the whole story, or the whole story may actually be that bad. We don't know. But all the people see is what they see on their screen, and that can be spun or manipulated in so many ways. Or it could be legitimate and the government's just actually doing a very bad thing. Doesn't matter because the optics are there. And I said, not that they would ever listen to me, but I cautioned them in spirit that they really need to be careful with how they do that, because I think the mission that they described in the very beginning was a good one, but the majority of the public is not going along with that narrative anymore. See the protests, see the people that are actively getting involved. Like, it's not good optically. They need to pivot, but I think it's too late to pivot on that issue. But they still need to pivot because it might help in the long run. But
I think that's a challenging one because I will say that the base and a lot of the Republicans are very staunchly in the opposite camp that he's not doing it enough and not doing it fast enough. So it's like
well, I say this with not love. I say this carefully, but a lot of the base doesn't actually know or understand immigration law at all. Um, a lot of things people are calling for from the base. Well, and a lot of the stats that are being thrown out too, because they don't know the law. And I was ignorant to the law for a very long time. Like, there's this widely held belief that all you have to do is get into the country and marry an American and you're automatically a US citizen. That is not true at all. It's very difficult to get a green card. It's very difficult to actually just come to the United States if you're not from a certain select country. It's very, very difficult for a lot of people. And I'm not
legal.
justifying, yeah, legally. And I'm not justifying it, but I think that Trump's administrative and the Trump administration's mistake was not looking at that angle as well, because a lot of the people that are being called quote unquote, and this is where you get into the weeds on this, because I'm not saying it's okay, but at the same time, if you're in a country where you have an oppressive regime, or your economy is in the shitter, or you have bad things happening, and your only goal is to get to safety, I don't know that I can fault somebody too much if there's no legal pathway to get somewhere else. Once you address that administrative issue, then I think you have a stronger foot to stand on for things like illegal border crossings. And I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying that they're only addressing one side of that coin and they're completely ignoring the other side. Because when they say things like, just come here legally, a lot of people can.
Well, I don't disagree with you, but I would raise 2 points for your consideration.
Go
The
for it.
first being that there are people waiting in line.
This is true. Yep.
And so by coming across the border, I don't know that I would want them to be in front of the people who are waiting in line. And I agree that we ought to look at potentially more legal immigration. But I'd also just raise the point of oftentimes people who come here illegally go through many other countries that are in better financial position and not oppressive
I
before they
agree.
get to us.
Mhm.
And why is it our responsibility to be the home that these people landed?
It's
I
not. Oh, go. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. I just one of the things that is challenging for me is, I do want to be a welcoming country, but I also want, if you're going to come here, for you to want to be an American, assimilate, and fly an American flag. And I don't need you to go that far, but you get my point.
I do,
And
and that's why I'm really glad we're having this discussion because it gives me a chance to really parse out what I mean by that because a lot of these are really big statements, and that's why immigration is such a frustrating topic because, and I can understand why. I agree with everything you're saying. Some of the things that I point to are, for example, the termination of TPS by this administration. They can do it. It's the manner in which they did it. And I am not convinced for a second that this was not racially motivated. I remain unconvinced because if you are going, I'm going to use Haiti as an example. If you're going to tell me that Haiti is better now than when TPS was issued for Haiti or Afghanistan, I'm calling bullshit. There's no way you can say that. On the flip side, I think TPS as a policy is horrible. It's a terribly bad
oh,
idea.
me
But
too. And
but
especially because of what I just said.
right. But here's the thing. And JD Vance actually kind of alluded, he didn't know what he was doing, but he kind of said something to this effect, but he didn't apply it to programs like that. Here's the way I see it. Whether you agree with it or not, these people were told they were good by the previous administration, which means they were told they were good by the United States government. And then they pulled the rug out from under them. And that's a legal status. So I'm not so much talking about illegal immigration. I'm just talking about when it comes to the Trump administration, I'm talking about programs that are like, for example, they discontinued the CBP1 app with no notice. So people that had legal appointments wiped away. People that were waiting in Mexico to have their hearing no longer had a hearing. And that's the kind of stuff that I think that administration has just really, really messed up because there were people that were doing the thing that they said they wanted them to do. There were people waiting in Mexico that lost their hearing. There were, people that were here with a legal status who paid their fees, paid the lawyers, did all that stuff, and then the rug just got pulled out from under them. That's the kind of stuff that I really disagree with on immigration. And the problem is, and why I think long term they're going to shoot themselves in the foot, is because if ICE is going out there and actually getting people with violent records and all that, and they are, but it's not every case, certainly not optically. And then that puts a stopgap on the legitimately good operations that they're doing because now ICE is perceived as a negative with a lot of people in the country, especially, in places where illegal immigration is a big problem. The more liberal cities, which I mean, you can make the case it's not my city, but that's what I mean by that. And I just think they're not taking a nuanced enough look at immigration as a policy, because I'm not saying it's easy, but I think you could do some pretty simple changes and you could make it a whole lot better from a policy perspective. And then you can, because I said this from day one, I was pro building the wall. I still am. I think that was necessary. But I think along with that, you have more ports of entry, which I think they've done, to be fair. And if they haven't, they should, um, to facilitate more legal entry. So then at the very least, you know who's coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I agree with all of the tactics that they have taken, and I will say that I do have some concern about people masked with no badges just grabbing people off the street. Okay. Again, even if it's just optics, it's not great optics. And, I don't want I don't want people living in fear who have legal status,
Hmm.
you know. So, and I agree that perhaps instead of just saying, hey, your TPS status, your temporary protected status is gone, maybe transitioning them back, maybe giving a portion of what we would have paid in the next 6 months for them to be here to them to help them reintegrate. I don't know exactly what they did, but I do, I don't think we need to be inhumane, especially when they were given a status, as opposed to, I, I, you'll hear a lot of people on the left saying someone who uh, is undocumented, because that's the term that they'll use, isn't breaking the law. And technically, they may be correct, but they broke the law when they illegally entered the country, and then they can be removed as a result of that.
Hmm.
Um, and I have a little bit less sympathy for people who did that, just because,
Sure,
again,
sure,
there are people waiting on and all of that. And we either are we have a rule of law or we don't.
sure.
And you can tell on my heartstrings all you want, and you can tell me the horrible stories about where they came from. And I will point to the people who have just as horrible stories who are waiting in line,
Hmm.
and are following our laws, in order to do it. At the same time, I think we should have more legal immigration. We should figure out a way to make our system work better. Um, on the other hand to that, though, is I have a lot of concern about the economic situation that young people face in this country. And ensuring that the people who do come are not going to be competing with young people who can't find jobs already. Youth unemployment, my understanding is at almost 10% now.
Hmm.
And so, um, there's this thing about a lot of the jobs these people take, people won't take. And that's because the wages are so low. And
The wages are so low because it's and I just want to put this out there. We're basically agreeing on the
yeah,
whole.
yeah.
It's just such a nuanced pot that you have to, like, to hit every nail, you have to kind of be like, okay, what about this? What about this? We're basically saying the same thing. Um, we're talking about different apparatuses, but I'm just, and I'm not saying you're wrong here. I'm just going to share an example. This is an example of um, this would be an example of somebody who can't. Okay, so let's say that you had somebody who lived in Venezuela and wanted to apply for political asylum in the United States. They can't do that in Venezuela because the US embassy has been closed for 4 years. So they can't apply there. So they have to go to another country with a US consulate. And maybe they can apply there if they have if they can be admitted into that country temporarily, which that gets into a whole mixed bag. That's why there's so many people from Venezuela that come in from so many different places because they have to get a legal status if they want to do this legally. They have to get a legal status in that country, and then they have to have a valid passport. If their Venezuelan passport is expired and they can't go back to Venezuela because they're legitimately endangered, they have a problem. That's just one of the things. Now, the U.S. government could do something to help facilitate that, and the CBP1 app was one of those things, which they then shut down. So it's just, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it's not as cut and dry as a lot of people think it is, for example.
No, and I get that, and I think we agree about most of this. And again, it
Hmm.
is nuanced. And my opinion is, like I said, just maybe we ought to just have a real conversation with Congress, having a conversation about what the policy actually is and about why it is that way and about
100%
who
agree.
should be here and who do we want here. Back when I was still doing my disability advocacy, in President Trump's first term, he wanted to pass something called a public charge rule for our public programs. And basically, if you were coming from another country and we're going to have to rely on any welfare type program, including medical care, you would not be allowed to do that. You would, if you were going to be a public charge, you would not be allowed to come here. So
Mm.
basically, you would have to show that you could support yourself and that you wouldn't be needing our public tax dollars. And we fought that very strongly, and it ended up not getting passed in his first term as a regulation. I'm not crediting myself for that not
But it
happening. I'm just
happened.
saying,
Yeah.
but it happened. Um, but I think that's a fair question.
I agree,
Like
but here's the flip side of that coin. I know a lot of immigrants. I don't, she's not a friend anymore because she moved back to Ireland, but she and her husband moved to Ireland. But um she came to the US on a fiance visa because her husband was an American, and she was allowed to come to the US, but she waited 6 months to get a work permit. So she couldn't
we
legally work
definitely
for
need
6 months.
to fix a lot of the things, and it's more just about and from the disability community's perspective, almost everybody with a disability often needs assistance in
Hmm.
meeting their needs. So we were opposed to it for that reason.
Hey, and fair
Because it
enough.
would basically keep most people with disabilities from ever being able to immigrate. So, but at the same time, in general, I would ask you to look at other countries' immigration policies, and most of them require you to prove that you can support yourself before
Hmm.
you're going to be able
Spain.
to come.
Spain is one of
Yeah,
those countries, actually. I found that
yeah,
out.
and I mean,
There's this myth that it's super easy to immigrate to Spain, and it's like, yeah, if you're independently wealthy, they'll let you right in. But because that's one of the requirements is you have to show other, you have to be uh, going there for a job, or you have to show that you have substantial enough income that you wouldn't. It's exactly like you said.
and most countries are that way.
Hmm.
And so I actually think maybe some of that has been changed in Europe and the UK, given what I understand about their current situation. But
Hmm.
and one of the other things that has happened, and I think a lot of this came out with Doge and USAID, is that a lot of nonprofits get money to help support people that in is actually tax dollars if you trace it all the way
Yeah,
back.
and
So,
yeah, that's 100% true. So to tie it into our main discussion about, like how the media presents things, before we went down that rabbit hole, I apologize for that, but immigration is one of the most misunderstood issues in the country, along with how money works.
how money works. Yes.
Yeah, that's
Well,
a
and
big one.
I think that there are, I mean, concerted efforts to make us not understand immigration and to make Americans not understand what the Fed is and how it works and
Hmm.
why it works and who it works for and all of those things. But but I think the real thing is that our people in Washington don't ever really have real conversations about the purposes of a lot of these things. And it is a fight, it's a tribal fight, left versus right, healthcare. Republicans just want to take your healthcare away. Oh, Democrats, we want to make sure everybody has healthcare. And they make it a fight, but we don't ever talk about, the elephant in the room, and that is people's bad health and what are we doing to fix that? I'm still hopeful that we're going to have some progress from this administration, although I think that Secretary Kennedy has found a lot of resistance
Yeah.
at the agencies, and especially from Big Pharma.
Yeah, we called
Um,
that one. We knew that was
yeah,
going to happen. But I think I can't remember, did they say in December or January that they were going to roll out new nutritional guidelines? And I'm actually super stoked to see that.
I am too, because our food pyramid is inverted and it makes no sense. And there's just like we could talk for a whole week about this because this is a passion of mine. It's part of why I bought a farm. It's part of why I grow my own
Oh,
food.
nice.
It's part of, these things. And um, so many of people's health problems could be cured by diet and exercise changes.
Hmm.
But sadly, so many people want a quick fix. They want a pill. They just make me better. And then they get the iatrogenic, consequences of needing another pill to
Hmm.
deal with the side effects of the first pill. But I really do hope that I'm still very hopeful that there will be changes in that regard. And changing the food pyramid, taking a lot of these things like food dyes that are terrible out of our food, can really help. But again, Congress is not helping Secretary Kennedy. In fact, they're
Nope.
fighting him in every way possible. And that's in large part due to the fact that, $4.6 billion was spent lobbying Congress, and a good part of that was pharmaceutical companies and big agriculture, who want us to continue to grow just corn and soybeans that we export, and then people to buy processed food. So, um, the big, and then comes back to the point that we were talking about before, that 1 in 5 of our dollars of our GDP is healthcare related. So what do we replace that with if people all of a sudden got healthy? And so it's not a simple thing, but essentially, as usual, we're just avoiding the actual real conversation and quibbling about the details, so that people don't actually pay attention to the real issues that.
Yeah, or how many emails in Epstein's email inbox mention Trump by name?
Yeah, and the media, again, I guess I would have three things, always question everything, follow the money, and what are they trying to distract us from? So, like,
Yep.
which brings us kind of back to the beginning of where we started, and I think that's part of it, is maybe the Epstein is discussion is part of trying to keep us from thinking about the economy and how bad. I mean, we're coming into the holidays, and I think retail is already showing really bad signs
Yeah,
about what's going.
yeah, I've been saying, I'll say it publicly now, but I've been saying, just talking to people randomly, I said, I think there's going to be a real oh shit moment in January after the holiday retail numbers come through. And I think January is going to be ugly. It's going to be a really sobering uh, end of year.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And so right now, everybody's just talking about Epstein. And so they're not paying attention to that. I mean, we were facing the possibility. I mean, I'm glad the shutdown ended, but can you imagine if Thanksgiving travel had been impacted by TSA shortages and that we're starting and things like that? I mean, I think we'll see, some indication of what we're talking about. If travel is limited over Thanksgiving, because I think travel had started to be limited in other ways.
Hmm.
And then, after Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and we'll start to see some
Yeah.
data about purchases. But I do think people are really struggling, and I think we're going to see a lot of things designed to distract us from that fact.
Yep.
But the distractions will only work for so long, and I don't know that they'll work when it comes time to go to the voting booth next November. So,
Like I was saying at the beginning, a year is a long time, but if the current trends persist, and I think economically they will, because I just don't think there's a ton you can do in a short amount of time to, you know, unspin that wheel, so to speak. Um, it's going to influence it, but you know, a lot can happen in a year.
yeah, well, I guess, maybe we should bookmark this and have a discussion, again, we can talk again before then if you want, but
You're
next
always welcome to come on here, Lisa. Anytime you want to
next
come on.
October, we'll see where we are, and I hope we're in better shape, but like you, I don't see much that they're saying that's going to make a big change. And, we're talking about some real structural challenges. We told generations that if you go to college, you're going to be fine. And now all of those jobs are disappearing. And
Whoa.
AI is doing that, and it's starting to do it. It's going to do it more. But I also think, we're looking at a big change in the economy, and we're not even talking about it. We're not even talking about how do we fix this. It was like when they outsourced all the jobs overseas, they told everyone to learn to code. Well, I think, coders are training AI to make them not necessary, like,
I
so
I I
there's a
know
lot of things.
I know someone who's coded an entire website using AI, so he didn't even need to learn to code. He just needed to learn how to prompt AI correctly. But you touched on something because that sort of the college thing speaks to kind of my generation the loudest because we weren't the first, but I think we were the loudest of from K through 12. We were told if you want to be something, you got to go to college. And then by the time you get into high school, they're like, oh, well, of course you're going to have to borrow money because college is expensive. Where do you come down on student loan forgiveness?
Okay, so I actually talk about this directly in my book, and I was a little harsher in the book than I would be now. I'll be honest about that.
Me too.
As someone who took out a lot of loans and paid them back, um, I don't think that the taxpayers should be on the hook for those loans. Okay, I'll say that. I do understand that why some people feel like they were lied to. And some of the terms of these loans are absolutely egregious, in my opinion. I also think that people are pretty financially illiterate and don't understand compounding interest and what that actually means and how it affects what you're actually going to pay if you choose like the lowest repayment plan kind of thing. So having said all of that, I think that um, one of the things to be thinking about is what responsibility do these educational institutions have in regard to this? And maybe the government might look at these interest rates and maybe try to do something about that for people. Or there are things that can be done. What I don't think it would be right is to bail out with federal tax dollars the
Hmm.
people who took these loans out. Because I will use someone who didn't go to college who then took out a business loan and now has to pay it back. Is it fair that they have to pay, that kind of thing. So I think that young people were sold a load of crap, and they were often, and a lot of these schools, um, they knew that the people getting their degrees were not going to, have a job as a result of them. And the terms of these loans, some of them, are pretty egregious to me. So should the government do something? Perhaps. Should it be a taxpayer bailout of these people? I don't think so. Um,
Can I tell you my idea?
sure, I'd love to hear it.
So this is actually laid out. I did an episode a few months ago where I did five political compromises that Trump could make and go down as the best president in modern history. And one of them was student loan forgiveness because you took the words right out of my mouth. I understand both sides on this one. So my deal is mostly because I think that it's immoral for the federal government to make interest on, well, I think it's immoral for the federal government to issue loans to citizens, period. But if they're, and this would only apply for federal student loans because the private ones, that's a separate deal. I personally think that you should meet in the middle. And I think if you took out student loans, you should have to pay the initial amount that you borrowed back, but I think the interest should be forgiven.
And I think you could forgive the interest. I think the problem is that a lot of these loans that are so problematic are not the federal loans.
Oh, really? Really? You think so?
Yeah,
Oh, well,
I don't know. I'd have to do more research to say,
we'd
but I
have to
think
look
some
at
of
the
these private loans are
numbers.
pretty egregious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think in
So, I
shit,
mean,
I
I
think
would
just
not be,
I think in terms of numbers, I think most student borrowers have, I think there's more federal loans out there than private, but I could be wrong. I have not looked at those numbers.
I think in terms of numbers, you are right. I think in terms of loans that where you end up paying like you've been paying for 30 years and you still owe more than you borrowed or something, those are
Mhm.
often private, I
Oh,
think.
really? Okay, well that I didn't know. So
So I think, and I can't be sure either. So let's agree to both take a look at that
we'll look
and,
at that. Yeah.
yeah, take a look at that. But I don't disagree that the government could waive the interest and that would do a lot too. But I think it's fair to say that you took out this principle, you should pay it back.
I 100%, or even if they did something to where like, okay, as of today, we're gonna move your interest rates down to zero. So whatever your loan balance is today, that's what you have to pay back, but there's going to be no more interest. I would even be okay with something like that. So because that's a little bit more fair to people who did pay off their loans because they paid the interest, so at the very least up to this point. But
Yeah,
my prescription to those people that did pay off their loans, okay, cool. They have records of it. Just submit a record of it to the IRS, and you get a tax credit. What that number is, I don't know, but that's something. Or you could do what I said. There's a way to do it that is a compromise that would be legitimate relief for many people and would stop the cycle. But the other side of that coin is the federal government would have to stop issuing student loans, and I don't think they're going to do that because otherwise you're just rolling it into another problem.
or yeah, I mean, there are other ways you could do it. You could cap the interest at a certain amount and forgive above that, and then new loans can't exceed. I mean,
Yep.
there are things that you could do about that. And, I did, when I said this in the book, I was like, people, taxpayers shouldn't have to pay for this. And then I go on to acknowledge the really crappy economic situation and the fact that, people were pretty much pushed. If you don't go to college, you're never going to make anything of yourself.
As
And
as someone who lived through it, I can speak to that. I was an 18-year-old moron who was just told if you want to go to college, you have to do this. And like I understood what interest was, but I did not understand how it was going to work because nobody actually sat you down and explained, even though they make you sign a promissory note with sometimes people that haven't even turned 18 yet, which I don't even think that's legal, but hey, you know,
yeah, I think that would be a good idea. That's one thing that he could do, to maybe look into some ideas like that. I just, um, and that would affect a lot of people,
it would affect a lot
Um,
of people.
what I don't know, and I don't really know the answer to this, and I'm not sure if you do, but what would the impact on sort of the deficit be and debt? I don't know how that interest is calculated, or I
It
don't know how.
it depends on how the interest is. I would imagine, though, I would imagine a lot of the interest gets paid to the loan servicers, not the government directly, although I'm sure they get some of it. But that's pretty much the main reason why I would be against um, forgiving the principal, because that's actual tax money that was sent out and would then have to be basically replaced with tax revenue. So I think not
Well,
only is it more fair, but I think the economic hit would be less.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And but from what I understand about federal budgeting, and that's only some, because sometimes even I was sitting in meetings going, I'm not really sure where you're getting that number. I don't understand, but
It's okay. They didn't either.
no, probably not. But it is likely that the interest is actually counted as income for the federal government, and then
Hmm.
therefore would have to be offset somehow. But again, I'm saying like I like the idea and it's a different way of thinking of it. And I think it's a way that taxpayers are not bailing out people for taking out a loan.
Even if it is sort of a bailout, I would say it's more preferable than, oh, I don't know, say a giant bank that fucked around and found out and then gets bailed out, oh, a few $100 billion.
I mean, I agree. I don't think if we see any more Wall Street and not Main Street things like happened after 2008, I think we may see some severe unhappiness erupt in this country.
Well, I
So
said when Trump did the COVID payments, I said I think this is a bad idea, but at least it's kind of nice to see Main Street get a check.
it was, but I think it paled in comparison to the PPP loans that,
Agreed. Yeah.
but at least, I know some people that really helped and they were able to
Oh, it
put some
helped me. I
savings
threw
aside
I
and
threw it in the bank. That's what I
yeah,
did with
a
my.
lot of people did. So, I mean, yeah, I think if he doesn't come up with something though, we're gonna see some challenges in, working out how um how he's gonna keep how they're going to keep Republican control of the House and the Senate.
It's going to be tough. It's going to be real tough. But a year's a long way away. But one thing we can say for certain is the media is not going to help them.
No, the media will not help him, and they will attempt to spin everything as, Orange Man bad. And so and every accomplishment he has, I mean, you just think about all of the peace deals he made, and did they talk about those at all? And
We have two back-to-back episodes talking about how Trump deserved the Nobel Peace Prize twice and how it was never going to happen.
yeah, I mean, and the media, I mean, crickets, mainstream
Nothing.
media on all of those things. So,
Well, they flat out criticized him on the we were talking about the peace deal in Israel and Gaza. They openly criticized him for that one.
yeah, so they're not going to do him any favors. And so he's going to have to, you know, I mean, if anyone can do it, I wouldn't put it past Donald Trump because he certainly seems to be able to pull some magic rabbits out of some hats when he
Su-
needs to.
Surprisingly, yep.
Yeah, but like we've said, it's going to take something that is going to change the pocketbook issues for people, I think. And the other thing is there has to be some kind of peace deal between the warring factions of the right in order to make sure everybody on the right votes.
Yep. That those
Turnout is the game in midterms. Turnout is the game. Got to
Yep.
get people to the polls. Um, so, I'd be thinking about possibly the other thing that can sometimes help is getting some ballot initiatives that people care about that on the vote. And so I don't know what those would be. They'd be different in every state and all those kind of things. But um, so maybe they have some of that in the works, that will
Yeah,
help
maybe.
motivate people to go vote. Even so, but I do think it'll be interesting to see how it all goes between now and then.
It's gonna be a wacky year. I can already see it. 2026 is gonna be it's gonna be interesting.
Well, I agree with you, and I'm sure we can find a lot to talk about
We're
between
gonna
now
we're
and
gonna come we're gonna come back in October 2026 and be like, wow, can't believe that happened.
then. Probably,
Just wow.
probably.
Well, I think that's a fantastic stopping point. But to let everybody know again, and you can definitely read it before we come back, and I'm sure you'll be back before October of 2026. But get your copy of Lisa's book. It's not too long. You can get through this bad boy. And wow, that's a lot of sources.
It is a lot of sources. You can take the lawyer out of the law, but you can't take the law out of the lawyer kind of
I'm
thing. But
wow, broken
yeah,
down by chapter even. Love it.
I did my best to keep the book under 200 pages. That book could have been 1,000 pages, but nobody's sitting down to read 1,000 pages these days. So I did my best to keep it readable, but also pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, by the way, thank you very much for signing it as well. I forgot to say at the outset of it, and we will absolutely continue with the mission here. Not going anywhere. The Average Intelligence
Awesome.
Podcast. But Lisa, thanks again for coming on, and we'll see you down the
My
road.
pleasure. Sounds good. Thank you for having me, and we'll talk soon.
Yep. Thank you everybody for watching. And if you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe and get Lisa's book. It's a fantastic read.